The second episode begins with a room full of German secretaries, all working as typists for the military during World War I. Even before they became Nazis, they were still sexist.
He wants a woman named Mueller, who can speak English to transcribe something for him. Turns out to be a propaganda leaflet trying to get black Americans to not fight in the war because of racism in America, and to surrender to the German army, promising they would be treated as equal citizens. Doubt that would go well for them, considering who came into power shortly after.
The shot focuses on a magnifying glass with an upside-down image of the man speaking. Usually such things denote that they are untrustworthy, or that they are speaking the opposite of what they mean.
Leaflets dropped on American soldiers. We see the old man's father from the first episode catch one and read it.
This is something the Germans actually did in World War I. The writing of the leaflet in the show is directly lifted from a real one, though I don't believe there was a reported case of any black American soldier actually giving themselves up to the Germans.
Also find out that this is what the "take care of this boy" note is written on the back of. Interesting. Germans trying to use existing racism as tool to manipulate black Americans would imply that someone in the show is also trying to use racism to manipulate cops. Maybe the racism of the cavalry is all a distraction. If that's the case, wouldn't go over too well with the current year crowd.
The old man, who is named Will, is reading the leaflet right before Angela shows up at the end of episode 1. Perhaps he is being manipulated by similar rhetoric.
Still don't believe that flashlight could be that bright.
Perhaps it's based off advanced technology I made.
Stupid. Nunn then takes the old man away instead of just arresting him for some reason, and we get the ugly credits in the frame again.
They could be trying to invoke a comic book style, although the chapter titles in Watchmen never appeared inside the frame. The title is important though, but we'll come back to that.
Nunn then takes old man back to bakery, leaving the police chief still hanging in the tree for some reason, being handcuffed to a wheelchair. Ironic. The nun finds the note and a bottle of pills.
Angela dumps the pens out of a world's greatest mom mug in order to serve Will coffee. We find out that she does this in order to get his DNA. Perhaps she will sacrifice her children or her family for her job.
Nunn retreats to her secret lair, expresses anger about Chief's death. Acting seems off in the scene.
They probably wanted her to express grief, but make sure it was in a supposed strong way, so it would not be perceived as too weak or stereotypically womanly. Angela then puts on her costume. It was a reoccurring theme in the original Watchmen that individuals draw psychological strength from their costumes.
Nunn comes out and hands him coffee. To her surprise, drinks it immediately in one gulp. Should have burned him. Maybe has some kind of heat immunity. She asks him who he is, and he says he's the guy that strung up the police chief. She doesn't buy it, citing his age. He claims to be 105 years old. Looks pretty good for that age.
Angela asks how he killed Judd, and he says he has psychic powers, and that he can manipulate material with his mind. This could be a trick. The song from Oklahoma at the end of the first episode is about someone trying to convince a man named Judd to kill himself. If Will convinced the police chief Judd to kill himself, you could in theory describe that as manipulating materials with your mind.
Then he mockingly suggests that he may be you, Dr. Manhattan. Then weird response. Nunn says you've been living on Mars the whole time, which is not how the comic ended. It would also ruin the idea of Veight's plan. Would humans be afraid of an alien invasion if they knew you were just sitting around close by on Mars?
True. It doesn't make sense. Also, Angela claims I cannot look like a human. I don't know why she would say that. It never came up in the original Watchmen, but in the sequel series that is currently coming out now, I can alter the way light reflects off me to appear human to others. This would be a pretty standard use of the way my powers are described in the original Watchmen. Will is skeptical as to why for all these things I could do, I could not appear human.
He brings up that you can make copies of yourself. Might be important. He also mentions changing skin color. Whole thing might be some weird analogy to race relations. He wants his pills, and Nunn asks why he doesn't use his powers to float them over. Old man admits to not being you, Doc, but doesn't deny having psychic powers.
Angela asks what the pills are for. Will says they help his memory, and that it's been a long time since he's been home. I'm not sure what being away from home has to do with improving one's memory. Maybe his long life and heat resistance is something that has to be recharged.
Nunn questions him why he killed the chief, replies he had skeletons in his closet, that there's a vast conspiracy going on in Tulsa, says Nunn can't handle it all at once, so he has to tell her in pieces. Nunn gets angry about the riddles, but her beeper goes off.
They keep cutting back to this wide shot. The blue light from the coffee maker and the machines in the background all remind the viewer of me and how I got my powers.
She answers phone, and for some reason pretends she doesn't know the chief is dead. Her phony act is very convincing. Might come up later. Old man is very interested in her fake tears.
Angela takes the cup for DNA evidence and leaves. Outside, we see someone has painted a couple embracing. This is a reference to the comic, where similar graffiti existed. It served to foreshadow the attack on New York, referencing the shadows left behind in Japan after the atomic bomb went off, so we can assume a similar attack may happen here. The shadows also serve to remind you, Rorschach, of your disgust with intimacy due to the memories of your mother being a prostitute when you were a child.
There's a newsstand referencing the one in the comic where the kid reads the tale of the Black Freighter comic. The comic inside the comic was mostly an analog for Vight's descent into becoming a monster in order to do what he thought was heroic. It was about becoming the very thing you want to fight, gaze into the abyss, and all of that. Also, we find out the squid rain happened in 4 different cities across the world simultaneously.
The newspaper seller believes that the squid rain is a conspiracy by President Redford in order to distract people while he takes away their rights. He even calls it the Libstapo, an interesting role reversal. We've only heard this type of rhetoric from cavalry and characters who we are supposed to believe are racist, yet here is a black man repeating a similar idea. Hopefully this means the ideas about racism in the show will not be portrayed as so black and white.
He also expressed his dislike of Keene, who was running for president, son of the man who outlawed heroes. He makes joke about Keene being a clone of his daddy. This might actually be true. Weird Asian girl comes and gets a stack of all the different papers. Very prim and proper. Don't like her. Hat has some kind of weird beetle on it. Night Owl's character in the original comic was inspired by the hero Blue Beetle. This one isn't blue. Not sure if it's related.
The man asks if the woman that the girl was buying the papers for reads all of them. She says yes, and asks if he reads all of them. He says he does, but he doesn't believe what they print. The girl leaves in a car that looks government-related and is branded as a tank. Possible that she works for Lori, who was the Silk Spectre, who we will find out in a later episode is working for the government.
At the top of the stack is the New Frontiersman, talking about the squid rain. That's the paper I sent my journals to. People considered it far-right and crazy. Wonder if they became more popular after publishing my journals.
Angela drives to where Judd's body is. A reporter asks for a comment and taps loudly on her window with his ring. He looks somewhat similar to the man who ran the New Frontiersman in the comic.
He knows she's a detective, so either he has some inside information or it's the detectives that get the special hero outfits, while the regular officers just get the yellow masks. Not sure why they get special treatment, though her car windows are tinted, meaning he knows who she is based on car alone. Mirror Mask enters her car and finds the cup, but doesn't mention it. That will probably come up later.
He asks Angela if she has any food, and she says there's nuts in the glove box. This is a reference to the comic, and how you, Rorschach, would always eat some of Dan, the Night Owl's food, when you went to talk to him. Though that was because of your lack of money, and maybe even time. Not sure it makes sense with Looking Glass, considering he works for the police directly.
They focus on his missing shoe again. Mirror Mask goes through the chief's injuries. They all relate to being hung. Nothing about him being beaten up and forced though. Only rope burns on his hands. Could be he hung himself. Possible to protect some dark secret, so people would think better of him. Just like the Poor Judd is Dead song from the last episode. Mirror Mask then questions Angela about the night before when she was with the chief. She's defensive and very obviously hiding something, though does admit that the chief did cocaine that night. He does say he's crying under his mask. Seemed like everyone really liked this chief.
Then a man with mechanical wings and a camera falls into Angela's car. We see they are reporters trying to get pictures and they're being tased down by the police. It is quite humorous.
The Russian starts attacking the reporter. The reporter calls him a Nazi. The Russian says he's not a Nazi but a communist. What's the difference? Ha ha.
We presume this means the USSR still exists in this world. Looking Glass tells Red Scare to stand down. Red asks if Looking Glass is in charge. He says no, and Red asks who is. The question is not answered. It seems very unlikely to me that a police department wouldn't have a normal chain of command, with a known second.
They pull the chief down, gently. None even hugs him. She starts to think of past Christmas with her husband, where sexual encounter almost started. Perhaps an affair with the chief.
They hear a noise and Angela surmises that someone has come into their house. At exactly midnight, the front door is broken open, and a cavalry member with a shotgun enters. Angela pushes her husband towards the ground and dodges the first shot. We never see Angela's husband again for the rest of the scene. What exactly is he doing this whole time? Angela then unplugs the Christmas lights from the wall in order to darken the house, though I'm not sure unplugging one thing would turn off not only the tree lights, but most of the surrounding house lights.
Nun runs into the kitchen and hides behind a counter, finding a knife. The shooter doesn't know where she is, despite having a direct sightline when she entered the kitchen. She kills him and takes his gun, however is immediately shot by a second shooter. Positioning doesn't make sense. He came from the same room the first shooter did, implying he entered through the front door. But if he did, what was that thud they heard earlier? Also, where was the husband during all this? The shooter should have had to walk directly past him to get to the nun.
The shooter looms over Angela, but doesn't kill her. We don't know why or what her husband was doing this whole time. Angela awakens in a hospital to find Judd with her. Because of the scene transition, many believe the implication is that Judd was the shooter.
Don't think it was. Shooter's eyebrows looked all brown or all black. Chief's are gray. It was dark in the other scene, but still, looks different.
Her first concern is if her husband Calvin is safe. Judd says he is, and that he was sitting there waiting for her to wake up for the past 3 days, and that Judd sent him home to change his clothes. Even with that being the case, humans are still illogical creatures, and there is still emotional significance to her waking up to find Judd instead of her husband.
Chief appears to have been shot as well, in chest and arm. Says the cavalry attacked all the other cops too. He thinks the guy who shot the nun was the guy she stabbed and killed. We don't know how she survived. He doesn't know that there was a second shooter. Angela could have forgotten because of being shot, but her husband should know. The angle of the bullet should also make it clear that there was another shooter.
Judd says that someone up there is looking out for you, possibly referencing either myself, or later in the episode, Will says he has friends in high places, and a flying vehicle rescues him at the end. Those who believe Judd shot Angela believe he simply couldn't kill her. It is also possible I saved her, vaporizing the shooter, leaving nothing behind.
Why would you do that?
The current sequel comic to Watchmen right now features me slightly altering the DC universe in order to see what kind of changes occur to the timeline. It is possible something similar is happening here, or that I saw some future event that required Angela to live.
Nun had a partner named Doyle. He was killed by the cavalry that night, but his children hid and weren't killed. We find out the children Angela is raising are really her partners. Nun wants to go after the people who shot her. Other cops all quit like cowards after the attack. She says she won't quit. And the chief says then he won't either. If he really is working for the cavalry, that would take on a whole new meaning.
I find that tragedy often brings humans together. Perhaps this is why they were so close, and it wasn't an affair. Red wants to go to Nixonville and round up everyone for questioning. Angela says they should stop and take a breath.
Strange. Same words Chief used last episode about Angela, even though she seemed raring to go. Maybe Chief's getting his time mixed up like you, Doc. Russian confused, saying she loves beating those guys up. This doesn't make sense. There's no reason given for why Angela would not immediately tell them she has the old guy in the wheelchair who claims he did it.
Perhaps because she doesn't want him to publicly accuse Judd of wrongdoing.
Flimsy. Weak reason.
They go to Nixonville. On the HBO website, it explains that there are multiple Nixonvilles across the country, that individuals who believe Veidt's alien attack on New York was a liberal elite conspiracy by the government moved to these types of insular communities. We can see it is inhabited by poor white people in trailers, some homeless. This might actually end up subverting the current year narrative, as the idea of a liberal conspiracy about the world ending is an accusation thrown at climate change, yet in Watchmen, we know that the alien attack was actually fake. So it would be quite subversive to mainstream audiences if they compared that to climate change.
Russian says that they don't all volunteer to come to the police station, they'll pull down the statue of Nixon. Weird threat. If the people idolize Nixon enough to care about this threat, the statue would not be a cartoon caricature of him. None doesn't want the raid to happen. Though she could stop it easily by telling him about the old man, she doesn't. Raid happens. Predictable.
The police forcibly beat, stun, and drag the residents away to be questioned. This plays against the current year narrative, making the audience sympathize with poor white Americans that are supposed to be racist. Also, the current year narrative typically portrays white elites subjugating lower income black Americans, while this is the opposite.
Nun looks upset by the violence. Then random guy attacks her for absolutely no reason. She then beats the guy senseless, using him as an outlet for her anger over the chief being dead and the guilt she feels about this incident. After, she goes into her car and freaks out.
After that, Angela goes across the street from her bakery. We can see the mural from episode 1 in the background. She takes the cup with Will's DNA to a museum dedicated to the Tulsa riot. Outside are people protesting red for rations.
Wow, talk about tone deaf. People protesting that outside a museum about a massive race riot?
Yes, it seems comical.
Inside this high-tech holograms, probably based off your tech, Doc. Soldier talks about joining the army, thinking it was a way to combat racism. Seems like a common theme.
Angela finds an automated screen featuring Henry Louis Gates Jr. as Treasury Secretary. Gates is a real person, though he is an author focused on black history and culture, nothing to do with monetary policy. Interestingly enough, Gates has actually received criticism from others in his field for a New York Times op-ed he wrote talking about the difficulty of implementing reparations, for many reasons. One of those reasons was that it was primarily Africans that sold other Africans into slavery. Not sure if this has to do with his appearance here in relation to the reparations, but it is unusual.
Nun tells the computer she's Will, the old man. This place apparently can test DNA of individuals to see if they were related to victims of the Tulsa riot. This is incredibly convenient.
Apparently victims of the riot and their family are eligible for government assistance, but yes, this is very strange to say the least. And why would she even think Will had anything to do with the Tulsa riot? Just because he is an older black man in Tulsa, Oklahoma? That seems to be quite racist.
Nun returns home, finds this guy, says he has visitation rights with the nun's kids, most likely their grandfather. He must have had some major problem for a court to assign Nun majority custody of her partner's kids instead of their own grandfather. Wants her to let him see kids, threatens to call police. Nun says cops busy rounding up all the Nixonville suspects. How public is that information, considering it's happening at this moment? Not a smart thing to say if she's pretending to not be a cop. First she tells a classroom of kids, and now this guy.
You want to know my secret identity?
He says he'll leave if she pays him, and she does. He then says it must be nice having those red for rations. You'd think after his son or daughter was killed by racists, he would not have made a comment like that.
They still have the clock that was shot during the White Night. Glass repaired, still see damage in the clock face. Kids dressed up as pirate and an owl. They're attacking the husband, who's dressed like a ghost. Owl's obviously Dan reference. Pirate is a Dark Freighter reference. Ghost could be a KKK reference. Interesting that the husband has taken that role.
The girl says they're going to feed him to the sharks. Angela says he would need to be weighed down, otherwise he'll float. These are references to the Dark Freighter, as the character used his dead crew members to construct a raft, and that attracted sharks to attack him.
Husband is weak. He cowers in the house as Nun has to get rid of the kid's grandfather. Is this a current year thing?
Yes.
Husband does question why she didn't arrest the old man, who says he killed their chief. Doesn't get a good answer. She just says he didn't do it. Again, says you, Doc, can't make yourself look human, like this is some kind of known fact. Husband agrees. Why would this be information that the average person would think about or know? What's going on with this?
I don't know. I can only guess that they are either trying to fake the viewers out, and some character will turn out to be me, or this was an attempt to try and prevent the internet from speculating that every character in the show is actually secretly me. If that is the case, it has failed on that account.
Nun goes to see the boy, playing with some kind of floating magnet toy you created, and building a castle that looks just like the one Vite's hiding in, looks like the one you built and destroyed on Mars. Why?
I don't know how he could be connected to all this. Clone, future vision, psychic message.
Nun says the world is not a colorful rainbow, but is black and white, referencing my mask and the binary ideology. Also says something bad happened to her parents. Famous Salvador Dali melting clock painting in the background.
Angela then says his Uncle Judd is dead. Probably not the best way to drop that information to a child who was in the house when his parents were killed. The actor, however, handles the scene very well, especially for a child actor. He goes from confused to scared to angry, and says that Judd was a policeman, and policemen die, referencing his own parents.
Kid then destroys the castle, the same way you did on Mars.
The boy and Angela's husband then watch the show about hooded justice. There's a very long government message beforehand saying no kid should watch it, even with adults, as well as further viewer warnings. It appears that this is actually mocking current year trigger warnings, in how incredibly long it is and how it is completely ignored by both Angela and her husband, again hinting that this is not the woke show that some believe it will be.
Mirror Mask watching the show as well. He's wearing a mask in a house for some reason. If they wanted to compare him to me, they shouldn't have ever shown his face in the beginning.
His house and car are also far poorer than Angela's, again reversing the current year narrative. We don't know what Angela's husband does or why she appears to be wealthy. It doesn't seem like simply not paying taxes would accomplish that on its own.
Cavalry scum who stole my face, also wearing their masks inside while watching Hooded Justice show and working on a suicide bomb vest. Show starts with dead man in river named Rolf Mueller, a circus strongman who some believe to be Hooded Justice. Narrator is supposed to be Hooded Justice. Says the dead man is not him, but he wants people to think it is. Says he won't tell us who he really is, because then we would stop watching. Sort of like this HBO show, presenting all its mysteries with no answers.
Next scene shows a paper commenting on the War of the Worlds radio scare, where some people heard its reading and thought it was a real news broadcast, another reference to Adrian's fake alien attack on New York.
4 masked men rob a grocery store, keeps demanding he opens the safe. Store clerk says there is no safe. Weird. Hooded Justice breaks in through the window and stops them, violently killing some of the criminals. It was reported that he was always very savage with the criminals and had anger problems.
One of the criminals doesn't fire at him when his back is turned, and he's fighting the others. Not sure if this is intentional since it's a show within a show, and is supposed to be a joke. We also see that there actually is a safe. Not sure why the guy behind the counter was willing to die for it. Perhaps this will come up later.
Clerk asks who he is. Hood gives a long speech about being unhappy and angry, about using the mask to become a new person and channel that anger. He says if he knew who he was, he wouldn't wear a mask. This is overlaid with images of the nun driving to the chief's house, implying this is how she feels.
And those lights still aren't working very well. Hooded Justice's story is complicated. In the original comic, we learn that he is the first hero, and that he stopped the comedian from sexually assaulting Silk Spectre, and that he was in a homosexual relationship with another hero. Rolf Mueller, the German strongman, is referenced to be found dead in the original comic, but it is never confirmed whether or not he was actually Hooded Justice. However, years later, DC Comics released a prequel series to Watchmen that was not written by the original creators. There they retconned Hooded Justice to make him definitely not Rolf Mueller, and that Mueller was actually a child serial killer. I'm not sure whether this show will follow the original comic only or the prequels as well. Also, many online are speculating that Will, the old man, was actually Hooded Justice. Interestingly, Will is actually wearing the same color combination of clothes as Hooded Justice, red and purple, and he even has a hood. And the outfit itself even looks like an old-fashioned theater usher outfit. In the Bass Reeves cowboy movie that he watched as a child, Reeves was recruited by someone known as the Hanging Judge. If Will is Hooded Justice, this would be yet another retcon, as even though his identity is unknown in the comics, we can see that he is white. The last thing of note is that the German woman who knew English in the beginning was also named Mueller, and online it says that the Sheriff Judd served in the US military during the Vietnam War under a man named Robert Mueller, implying a wider connection or conspiracy.
Nun visits the chief's wife. Lots of people here. Nun is the only black person. Guy comes over and knows who she is. He's Keen's son. The guy who's running for president and is possibly a clone. Chief's wife used to work for Keen, but Keen makes a weird comment like she still does work for him. Maybe she is secretly. He acts like Nun is still a cop. She tells him she's retired. He nods, but it's clear he knows it's just a cover.
Angela faints and is taken to Judd in his wife's bedroom. She tells Angela that Judd loved her. The widow leaves, and we learn that Angela was actually faking it just to get access to their bedroom.
She called Mirror Mask cold, yet here she is playing off the sympathy of her newly widowed friends in order to search the chief's room. Good thing they didn't bring her to a guest room, even though that is probably what would happen considering how large their house is. Where does their money come from? What did the wife do for Senator Keene? Strange that a rich political elite type would marry a lowly cop.
Angela has X-ray goggles, another reference to Night Owl's technology. Does Dan have a connection to this police station in Tulsa, or is it all a coincidence? They show the picture of Judd's father again. We see a Hebrew tattoo on Angela's arm that means unconditional love, though this is the actress's actual tattoo in real life, so it's probably not related to the show.
Nun sees weird shape with X-ray. Opens secret panel to reveal a KKK uniform. Wow, I guess when the old man said he had skeletons in his closet, he meant literally. Convenient. Some people think this means Judd was in the KKK and is now working for the 7th Cavalry, but doesn't make sense. KKK should have been mostly before his time. If he was cavalry, it would have been one of the fake masks copying me. More likely Chief's father was in the KKK. Don't know why there's a sheriff badge on the outfit. The whole point of the uniform was to be anonymous.
Yes. That doesn't make much sense. The KKK was heavily involved with the Tulsa riots in real life. It's possible that Judd felt responsible for his dad being in the KKK, and that's why he was going after the cavalry so strongly. Though if he was secretly working with them, it would explain why he never felt the need to wear a mask. Angela manages to sneak the outfit out of the house, and the camera slowly zooms in on this painting. It is a reproduction of a real painting called Martial Feats of Comanche Horsemanship, which is the name of the episode. The painting was inspired by Comanche riders, who would hold onto the side of a horse in battle, using the horse's body as cover from projectiles. The painting does show riders using this technique on both a black horse and a white horse, the implication possibly being that someone is using race or racism as cover to hide their true intentions. Though the description of the painting by the artist also mentions that the Comanche could quickly switch to either side of the horse as cover, so it could also be a reference about swiftly switching sides in a conflict.
Camera fades into Veidt riding a white horse. Implication: Veidt is the Comanche rider, using the horse, or racism, as cover. Castle has red vines growing over it, referencing blood or Mars. Veidt's horse's name is Bucephalus, same name as Alexander the Great's horse. Typical Veidt.
Adrian plucks a tomato off a tree, which is not how tomatoes grow in the real world. More genetic tampering? Then we see Adrian receiving another anniversary cake, and they are singing He's a Jolly Good Fellow once more. Does this mean that another year has passed, or that every day Adrian goes through the same routine? Unlike in the first episode, Adrian wants to rush through it as if it's all formality, and doesn't seem to care at all.
Veidt asks the woman, when is a lie not a lie? She says when it's acting. Sounds like he programmed her not to lie, so this might be a way to get around it. Veidt says he wants real tears tonight.
The man says he requires the watch he gifted Adrian for the play tonight. It's worded in a way that makes it sound like he just gave him the watch, implying that Adrian is continually reliving the scene from the first episode, though I do believe more than one day must have passed, as it would take Adrian's creations time to learn the play and perform it correctly. Also, his demeanor towards them is completely different. In the first episode, he was gentle. He lied to protect their feelings, and was happy that the man created the watch on his own. Now he is flippant towards them, and calls them dimwits, and asks the man if it ever occurred to him that he himself was a prop. He responds, "Would you like it to occur to me?" Adrian replies, "There are so many things I would like to occur to you." This seems to answer the question that in the first episode, it was the man's initiative of creating the watch on his own that seemed to please Adrian.
We see Adrian watching the play. Lights and music, people have hoods on. Looks like executioners. The play is a recreation of your origin, Doc, when John Osterman got ripped apart and became you.
It appears to be. However, Adrian has two key parts of the story wrong. The first is that Janie's watch that was left in the intrinsic field chamber, the reason I went back in and was trapped, was a wristwatch, not a pocket watch. The second is that in Adrian's play, Janie stays with me until the end and tells me she loves me. In the original comic, I ask her to stay, but Janie leaves in tears and doesn't say she loves me. The original scene is far darker, yet Adrian has romanticized it for his play.
Veidt pushes down a plunger, which starts a fire in the box, burning the man inside to death. Disgusting. He cries out for his master as he dies. Veidt again calls for her tears. For some reason, this display of emotion is very important to him. Then a naked man painted blue, with gratuitous genital shot wearing a doc mask, descends with a soliloquy. She asks the actor playing me if this is the end. He replies, "Nothing ever ends," which is the last thing I said to Adrian when he wanted me to comfort him and tell him that all the people he sacrificed in New York was worth it for peace. Adrian is very pleased with the performance. Turns out the stagehands are all clones. So they were clones and not robots. Veidt tells them to remove the corpse of the dead clone. One asks if it should be put in the cellar with the others. This has been happening a lot. Clones don't seem concerned by the death at all. Veidt asks the clone his name, gives them all different ones apparently. Asks him if he would like to be the new Mr. Phillips, which was the clone who just got burned alive. He's happy about it. Veidt says he'll have use for the clone's corpse before too long, using the bodies to make more clones maybe.
A show within a show, another reoccurring theme. Adrian pulls the melted watch from the corpse's hand. It is almost midnight, another doomsday clock reference. The date says the 26th, so not September 10th, as it would be in Angela's timeline. This version of Adrian, assuming this is Adrian, is very different from the original comic. Adrian showed remorse when he sacrificed people for his goals, even apologizing to his cat creation he used to lure me into his trap. Adrian did view himself as a hero. He was never happy about killing anyone. Yet this Adrian shows no remorse for his clones, and is quick to anger and yell. Some have suggested that this is really me pretending to be Adrian, though that would be even more out of character. I see no reason why I would do something like that.
Why is Veidt using clones to recreate this play of your origin? Maybe the male clone is a clone of you. Maybe in the first episode, he really did care for this clone, and it really did make the watch on his own. And Veidt put him in an intrinsic field. Tried to create another you, but it failed. Maybe he thinks if the clones relive the emotional experience of you repeatedly, it will somehow create another you.
Perhaps. Maybe his incorrect belief that Janie stayed with me when I was ripped apart will end up being significant. Next we see that Will has taken the handcuffs off. Angela is confused about what he is doing. Will says he is hard-boiling eggs. Another Watchmen reference to you, Rorschach, when you ate a raw egg at Dan's house.
Old guy says he went across the street and came back on his own because they have not finished talking yet. Nun says she looked in the chief's closet. Old man says he didn't mean literally. Guess it was just a coincidence. Nun thinks the KKK outfit and closet was a setup, since it was so easy to find. Well, at least that's something. Nun threatens, says she'll arrest him. He doesn't believe her, and says even if she did, he would have been rescued by friends in high places. The phone rings as Will's egg timer goes off. As Angela answers it, Will reaches into the boiling pot and eats the egg. Another HBO show with a main character who's immune to heat. Strange. The DNA result came back. That was quick. It reveals Angela is his granddaughter. Will knows what she just learned on the phone. Maybe he somehow pieced it together when she took the mug. Or maybe he does have some kind of abilities. Old man says he wants to show the nun where she came from. Nun instead decides to finally arrest him. She lifts him to put him in car. Acts weird. Like she's hugging him. Similar to when she held the chief's body. Then flying craft comes. Drops big magnet on car. Picks up and takes off. Hope old man didn't have any metal fillings. Car almost hits Nun. Pretty stupid if they needed her.
The last shot is Angela catching the leaflet out of the air, like her grandfather did. Not a lot of answers this episode, just more questions. I'm still holding out hope that there's actually a deeper meaning to all this, and that the racism is actually a subversion.
What do you want to happen?
Imagine how amazing it would be if all these media publications kept praising the Watchmen show for its current year woke narrative about fighting racism. But then we find out that the racism is all a manipulation, a weapon used to distract us from the real, more insidious things going on. The media would lose its mind. This would align perfectly with the original Watchmen comic and how it was a deconstruction of the superhero genre that was then transformed into a critique of the absurdity of the real world at the end.
There's no way HBO would be brave enough to do that.
You're probably right.